Every SaaS company tracks customer health, but you may be overlooking some signals that are really important that can change everything for your business.
Not all events are equal. Not all features are equal.
The real magic seems to happen at that account level, tracking whether or not they have multiple users, how many of them are active, how many of them are adopting the tool, are getting activated.
People assume accounts are safe. Multi-user activation is a measure of engagement, that you don't just have one person using your tool. That to me is a recipe, warning, warning, warning. And if they're starting to not use it as much, and that's a big signal, oh my goodness, is something happening here?
So how do you think about getting ahead of that? Just getting in front of churn and trying to be a bit more proactive than reactive. So how do you get ahead of that?
Just go and talk to them. If they're that important, talk to them.
Today, we're going to break down the key metrics that are often or can be ignored, but can make all the difference between a renewal and a churned customer. My name is Peter Preston, joined by Kate today.
Hi there, everyone.
So, Kate, when we talk to people about engagement, what's one of the first metrics we often hear people are tracking?
The very basic level do logins, but we would probably say active user logins, which is kind of nice to give you a sense of whether they're kind of engaging or not, but it probably misses the point a bit.
Yeah, it's a very high level metric, not one to ignore necessarily, because I do think it is a sign of engagement. Where we like to spend time talking to people is actually digging down into what the events that are actually happening. So how are customers actually using a product? Walk us through why it's important to measure at the event level.
Well, that actually gives you a real indication of the actions your customers are actually doing, which in my mind is just critical. And people are often overlook and start looking at individual events, but you're much better actually looking at something at an account level, because the account level is the sum of the users, and that's probably giving you a better indication of health.
Yeah. And just to be clear, we are talking B2B SaaS here. You're selling to companies, company to company. We're talking accounts here. So the real magic seems to happen at that account level, tracking whether or not they have multiple users, how many of them are active, how many of them are adopting the tool, are getting activated, all that sort of stuff. And I'm probably getting ahead of you on that one right there. So let's go right into that. Talk about adoption, activation. Why are these things important and how do you measure them?
Holistically, that you need your engagement signal, which is a sum of things. It is about your feature adoption, but it's not just any old adoption. To me, there's a nuance that not all events are equal, not all features are equal. So it's actually about learning to understand which are the features that are most importantly being used and giving you indications of engagement. So if they've adopted well, it means they're probably using the product quite well, but it's also looking at how deep they're using the product. We like to think of it in terms of compiling it almost like a health score. So you actually have looking at things in more of a weighted way. Some things are more important than others, and you actually track and log and record and evaluate them as such, because often people just take a look at total event scores and just adding up counts, and that's not necessarily so useful. I think the other one to also look at is multi-user activation is a measure of engagement, that you don't just have one person using your tool and nobody else is. That to me is a recipe, warning, warning, warning. Unless you absolutely understand how and why they're using your tool, but to me, that person could leave and, it sets up a risk.
Looking at everything at the account level almost sort of falls apart. You do want to watch individual user activations too, right? You aggregate everything up, you get health scores at that account level. You can also track them at user levels, but you do want to see if big company comes on and they hire someone, that new person is getting activated as well. You and I have found that a lot of people think of activation as a point in time. Company has been activated, we've moved on, and we no longer track that. So you're a big proponent of basically continually monitoring who's being activated at these big companies. So I think that's a really important one to point at here. So you are looking at the company, but also the individual users and making sure that they are adopting and activating. I'm going to move us on to how do you see drop-offs or churn? How do you see big accounts slipping away from you? What are you looking for?
Well, I think a lot of people assume accounts are safe, particularly if you've had them for a while and particularly if they use you a lot. But to me, I also like to track the signals. So I look for things like, you're starting to have multi-user disengagement. Sometimes that can be because of restructures or people are no longer in that job. But fewer people are logging in. To me, that's a sign of that needs to be checked out. Not necessarily you're in warning territory, but it does need to be checked out. The second one, power users. And if they're starting to not use it as much, for me, again, that's a big signal. Oh my goodness, is something happening here? Again, it could be that they're moving on to a new job and they may be onboarding someone else. But again, this is implying that you're actually having that knowledge and you're actually monitoring that. And then the third one, which often I think is a very, very late sign, is your exit signals. Increased frequency of data exports, high downloads of documentation, probably a lot more support tickets, etc. Could be an evidence that they're starting about thinking to switch. It's really kind of tracking those. And if you start to get those signals, you just go and investigate. Be proactive is how I would just say. You don't react too late, you try and be proactive.
Right. You mentioned like those exit intent signals where, if someone starts exporting all their data, that's potentially a bad sign. So how do you think about getting ahead of that? I don't want to say predicting, but just getting in front of churn and trying to be a bit more proactive than reactive. Because if someone downloads all their data, it might be a lost cause. So how do you get ahead of that?
For me, it's that one step before where you're actually looking for their engagement health. How healthy are they? And if they're starting to drop, is actually then investigating and trying to work out what's happening. And if necessary, go and ask them. It's the same with your power users. If you've always had people, it's monitoring you at account level, but also having a sense of your power users. So to me, it's just who's healthy and who's not, who's trending constant or who's trending upwards. And then the question's always asked, but how do I prioritize that? Do you actually look at your subscription levels or those that are strategically, those that are going to pay you more? Great. Make sure you keep them. And also those that are strategically important. For example, you're entering a new segment and you want to make sure that you don't lose them, or they're about saying, oh no, I tried that and that tool in a network session of theirs, an industry group session. You don't want to be the one that's mentioned in a negative way. You want to be mentioned in a positive, word of mouth. So to me, they're probably the main things. And then, but you have a process underneath. You've got to look for those signals. And if you start to get those signals, then you've got to have an approach to say, what is the way we are going to investigate this and follow that up? If you've got customer success people, you literally say, these are your 10 accounts, their engagement's dropping, just go and talk to them.
Yeah.
If they're that important, talk to them.
The trend continues, do more with less, which from what we're seeing means more accounts per customer success manager, per support manager, whatever it is. It's basically like you handle more and more customers or clients. So being able to prioritize is super critical.
It is, and try and humanize yourself. So when you are following up, just be really clear. Don't do a blanket email. Well, it's obvious it's a blanket email. Put something in there that at least is something about them.
Yeah, that seems to get people really fired up. I've noticed a lot of whinging on LinkedIn about, don't send me this automated, your renewal's coming up in 90 days. Do you want to talk email? Like, give me a good reason to talk to you. And then I'm happy to sit down with you.
In my world, it would actually be looking, which I know is, people might go, oh my goodness, but it is actually looking and saying they're using this tool really well, but they're actually not using this new feature. And just have a discussion saying, there's these use cases and I just wanted to check whether you actually are considering these. Happy to talk you through, happy to pass on the lessons other people have done. And we used to do that when we had Think Tilt. And I know, time's moved on, but it actually worked a treat. People said, oh God, you give a damn. And not only that, we got some great product ideas out of the conversation. So it wasn't a wasted conversation.
No, I don't think it ever is, right? That adoption side, right? Are they getting to that value? I'm not gonna keep harping on that. I think we've covered that in other videos, but want to pivot us a little bit away from the doom and gloom of churn and retention side of things. Let's talk about how you can spot opportunities to upsell or cross-sell. How do you go about looking at that through the same lens, right? This is still customer health signals, but you can expand, you can grow with your current customers. So what are some of the things that you're looking for in customer health? Like what kind of signals?
Consistently high scores, like they're consistently showing that they're in your product, they're using your product and they're well engaged with their product. To me, they're a Monty for conversations. High adoption of your premium features. Are they starting to engage with those? Got more users being added. That's always nice, isn't it? More users means more stickiness, means less likely to lose them. But also, it also gives you the ability to have more conversations about, well, you may actually in that organisation have more opportunities for using the tool in different ways, is whether they're trialling some advanced features and they haven't yet committed to them. They're kind of just trialling and having a look. That also is another opportunity for a conversation in my mind, I would think, don't you?
I think so. And we talked about before is like looking for like the exit signals. If someone's walking towards the door, they're going to grab all their stuff and export, et cetera, et cetera. How do you think about getting ahead of of this, right? Like I know we're talking about signals here. To me, this is actually quite a bit different. You're still looking at customer health signals, but it's a different way of segmenting your users. And I think that's the important bit is what are you looking for? And you actually kind of have to set up your health scores to indicate both opportunities and risks.
It's a really good point about the segmenting. Think of Proforma, which was a form builder. For us, it was one thing for them to build a form, but when they started, for example, to use really complicated conditional logic and questioning and things, you knew that they were really starting to be advanced users. And if they were using the free account and you could see that they were starting to hit the boundary of what the free account could do, it was a really, really, really great opportunity to have a conversation about, got any of these problems, got any of these processes you want to do, then here, you could probably use a form in that instance, and this is how we've done it.
Yeah.
So it was a great opportunity. So I think you're absolutely right. You can actually spot and identify, just knowing your product well, you can go, well, traditionally, if people start to use XYZ feature, that means there may be a candidate for upgrade.
This stuff really gets me excited. I think I also look at retention as an opportunity to keep people and keep adding value to them. But as geeky as it can be once you start getting into the numbers. But let's wrap it up there. I think we've talked about some important things. So give us some bullet points. What were the highlights to take away from this video today?
Not all events are equal. So I'd go at the account level engagement and not just the user level. So account. Keep in mind user, but it's account. Engagement drop-offs, know your scores, understand what your health scores are and whether they're improving, staying constant or going down, and you have an action for each of them. And then the third thing is knowing your product, knowing where your value points are so that when you have those upsell triggers, you can actually action them.
So it's really taking that pivot from reacting to being proactive about it. And if you would like any help in changing the way that you approach your customer success or even your customer support, you want to be more proactive than reactive, please leave us a comment down below or come to accoil.com. We're more than happy to have a chat with you, see how we can help you put that into place. All right. Anything to send us off with, Kate?
So more sales to you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.